Childhood trauma can present itself throughout adulthood in feelings of shame, guilt, depression, anxiety, isolation, and more. In this episode of Normalize the Conversation, we hear a mental health journey, from verbal abuse at age 9 to disordered eating behaviors to the ups and downs of romantic relationships. Welcome to Normalize the Conversation. I'm your host, Francesca Reicherter, and today I'm joined by Jaclyn Tipton, a mental health advocate and program director for NAMI Tallahassee. Jaclyn, thank you so much for joining me today. I'm really excited for our conversation. Before we begin, I just want to check in with you. How are you really?
Oh, goodness. Wow. That's a good question to start off with. I'm frazzled. Oh, I had a couple of meetings today, and I'm going on my very first silent meditation retreat this weekend. So I've been getting lots of emails about that. My cat has a UTI situation going on, so I'm calling the vet and insurances. And then my fiance just came back from Kentucky. So I forgot about this podcast until 30 minutes ago. So I was like, ah! So I'm frazzled and very stressed and anxious, but not in a debilitating way.
So it's been a day.
It's been a day. It's been a day.
It's really amazing that you were able to kind of experience so much in one day and yet still show up for this, for yourself, to have that positive attitude toward it and not feel debilitated by it. Because when I'm feeling overwhelmed and so much is going on and I start to get frazzled, I completely shut down.
Yeah, I still get like that. But it's just a lot of practice, and knowing your coping mechanisms and when to say no and stuff like that. But yeah, it still does happen to me. So I'm glad that today is not one of those days.
Likewise. So we actually met less than a month ago in Orlando at the NAMI Florida conference. And wait, so I never actually asked you this, but what brought you to the conference?
So I actually work with NAMI Tallahassee. And it's always so exciting to say because we have been volunteer based for over 10 years, and we just got enough money to hire a program coordinator for the first time, and that's me. So even our executive director, the person who's, fronting everything in NAMI Tallahassee, doesn't get paid. So I feel so incredibly grateful for this position. And for my depression and anxiety, I can't work full time anymore. And so this job is 25 hours a week. And it is at a livable wage where I can have, a 2-bedroom apartment with my fiance. And so that's kind of what brought me there. It was my first NAMI conference, and, we didn't have any conferences up until that point, since before COVID. So it was a push into the mental health world that I had never been in person before.
First of all, congratulations on getting that job position opportunity and to get the funding. Take it from me, a nonprofit startup. It is hard to get to that point, to have that funding, and that takes a lot of work. And to see how long you volunteered with it and how much you stuck it out and got to this point is incredible. So just congratulations.
Thank you so much.
What was it like for you, that experience of being at your first mental health conference?
Oh, it was really nice. Having so many people there that kind of either were going through the same thing or had loved ones going through the same thing was really nice. I would say my favorite part about the conference was the young adult track, which is, she didn't say it, but Fran was actually speaking at the NAMI conference, which is why she was there. And so we had a dinner for people around our age. So I think 18 to 29-ish. And everyone was so cool, so nice,
Yeah.
really debilitating mental illness, but in recovery and having jobs, and everyone had business cards. And it gave me so much life to know that there are other people out there like me that struggle every single day with their mental health, or, like panic disorder or bipolar disorder, like all these different things. And they are living very fulfilling lives, both in their personal and their work life. So I really, really enjoyed that.
I did too. I loved how lighthearted that dinner was. For
Oh,
all of us to be so open, so vulnerable, sharing their experiences, sharing some very difficult experiences, and still finding ways to laugh and to enjoy it and to feel like we're in it together, which is so hard with mental health conversations. Because when you're talking about serious mental illness, when you're talking about relationships with mental health and how it can be very difficult and traumatizing situations people have been in, to find that sense of security and comfort that you can not only talk about it, but laugh and feel safe enough to find that sense of comfort is
yeah.
beyond anything I've experienced in a group setting like that before.
Yeah. And I think it really showcases how our generation uses humor to cope with what's in our head, because there were jokes nonstop, and they were killing me. They were so good.
Was so many jokes, and it was just nice to see. I don't want to say it was nice to see other people struggling, but it was nice to see how not alone. And although so many of our situations and experiences were different, there was that kind of common ground in so much of it.
Yeah, yeah. There's so much towards the people who like aren't in recovery, right? So the people who, like us at one point, were in a really, really low state. So, so much effort and energy is put towards those people, but then there are people in recovery that don't really like get a lot of notice. So to have a bunch of people around our age in recovery, oh, I could talk about it forever.
Likewise, because there's very rarely groups of people our age.
Yeah.
Usually or at least for me, when I enter into a room, whether it was in the psych ward, just in a group setting, it tends to be a lot of people who are older. And although all their experiences are
Mhm.
valid, and I love to offer that space and support, sometimes it can feel difficult because they're not in the same life position and time period as I
Yeah.
am, where social media is a big influence in my life versus they've built careers before social media, so they don't need
Yeah.
to rely on how many followers they have to get people to want to
Yeah.
listen to them.
Oh, I
It's
know.
just it's so different. So that space to me was amazing. Before we move into your story, I do have to ask, what was your favorite part of the conference and why was it my speech?
I did love your speech. I will say that you were asking questions. I would say I'm a really empathetic person, but Fran was like, "All right, pop quiz." And so we would like do little quizzes on our phone. I failed every single one of them. I was like, "Oh my god." Do you have like data of how many people got things right and stuff afterwards?
I should look into that. I didn't even think about it. I don't know why, but now I'm curious. I don't
Yeah,
know
I
why.
know.
I assumed that they were easy quizzes, but they're not because we don't know this stuff. No one teaches us. And I wrote the book on it. So to me, it's
Yeah.
like, oh, everyone knows it. No, that's why I wrote the book.
Yeah, like everything you were saying, I was like, oh yeah, I do that. Like, oh, this is exactly like how I go through it. But like putting it in terms of like, this is, I can't even remember. I'm so sorry. But like, this is this portion, and this is this portion, and this is when you say this. I was like, wait, there's like an algorithm for this. And so it confused me, and I failed everything.
I definitely enjoyed that pop quiz and being on the other side of it and not making other people fail, but maybe a little bit because
I was
it's great for
laughing
that
at
not to be
myself.
me.
I took a screenshot of my 33% on one of them. I was like, oh God. I do want to add, it was my favorite speech because yours is the only speech that I was like, you should have a TED Talk. And I did research for you. I've never done that for anyone. And I was like, Fran, listen.
I applied, by the way, so we'll see how that
my
goes.
Gosh. Oh, I need to do that for you as well. Oh my gosh, I'm gonna do it.
I appreciate you. And now that we talked about how amazing I am, because I love that, I sound so conceited right now. But no. Now that we talked about me, let's talk about you. I mean, this is your episode. What's your mental health journey?
Okay, I think I started noticing how anxious I was at around like 8 or 9 years old. And then, well, first off, I have generalized anxiety disorder and persistent depression with major episodes. Meaning that my depression won't go away. So it's always like kind of in a mild state. But then I can fall into a really deep pit sometimes, and it takes me a while to get out of it. So 9 was around the time my generalized anxiety started to form. And I believe that was triggered by my stepmom first coming into the picture. Although, there's no way to prove that. My mom is depressed and anxious as well. So it could be genetics at play. And then I really noticed my first major depressive episode when I was, 14. And I had started dating this guy, and I was like, oh my God, I'm so in love with him. He is like the one. I'm going to marry him, like all of that stuff. And then we were dating for maybe like 6 months. And then he FaceTimed me and he said, actually, I realized that I'm gay. So I was like, oh, great. So I cried and I cried and I cried. And I was like, this isn't normal to like cry every day for a year. So finally, I kind of like started getting out of that. And I went into a charter school where you get like your AA and your high school diploma at the same time. So it was really rigorous. And they said that like the people who worked there were like, 10th grade is boot camp. So be prepared. And it was really, really hard. And so in 10th grade is when I got put on my first, like medication. But the doctor was like, oh yeah, it's just situational. So here's birth control because you're just hormonal. I was like, okay. So I went on birth control, and then I found out that not super like at the same time, but that was the first time that I realized that I was really sensitive to medication. So I started throwing up every single day because at the beginning of like the pills, because it mimics pregnancy. Which tricks your brain into thinking you're pregnant. So you have like normal cycles and whatnot. And so during the morning sickness phase, I was throwing up every single morning. And so that kind of contributed to, some of my like anxiety, because it's like going to class and then realizing you have to throw up every single month and then having to run to the bathroom and stuff. So that was really stressful. So, I was pretty depressed. In 10th grade, my dad said that they coined it the cry night, when I would come in on Wednesday into the living room and just cry and cry and cry. And they would have to kind of like say, hey, everything's okay. This is for your future and whatnot. But I was really, emotional, and I was like, I don't really understand why. So it was just a lot of confusion, but mostly feeling like I had to be perfect all the time, because those standards were put on me by my dad and my stepmom to like always be better and stuff like that, but in kind of a negative way. So then we go, let's fast forward. Because things were pretty mild and like good, just very stressful getting my AA and my high school diploma. But then I went to FSU, and then halfway through my first year, I met another guy, and he was pretty terrible. Lots of very offensive jokes towards people, and just not, it was a very toxic situation, but we weren't together very long, maybe like 2 months. But then that stayed with me whenever I told him goodbye, because this wasn't good for my mental health. It just really stuck with me. So the summer after my my first year at FSU, I told my dad, hey, I think I need therapy. And this was the first time I'd ever brought it up, but he was kind of like open to it. He was like, oh, shrinks don't do anything. But at the same time, my sister, who's diagnosed with bipolar 1, well, stepsister, so she's not blood, but she was diagnosed with bipolar 1 and pathological lying and like something else. So she had been going to therapy for a long time. So I was like, I think that this is something that I need at this point. And he said, well, why don't we just put you on some medication and like call it a day? And then I cried because I was like, you want me to just medicate myself without even trying to find out why I'm upset and sad and crying and stressed all the time. So I finally was like, okay, sounds good. And he put me in therapy, and it's been a rocky road since then, but thank God that I started in therapy, because I don't think I'd be here today without my current therapist. So I was only with that therapist for that summer, but she taught me a lot of like the basics of mental health. So taught me that a lot of my trauma from my stepmom specifically, because she's a narcissist. So fun to be a daughter of a narcissistic mother. It was really, really damaging. And so we kind of learned that through my trauma, I felt like I wasn't worthy enough to be alive. Like I wasn't doing enough in my life to constitute living. And to really like verbalize that and to conceptualize it with someone else was really, really jarring and really upsetting. And I think that kind of snowballed into where I'm at now with being a mental health advocate and working for NAMI and, you know, being in the nitty gritty of everyone else's recovery and mental health and remission and all of that good stuff. But my first therapist told me, is a baby worthy? And I said, what do you mean? And she said, well, that baby can't take care of itself. It hasn't done anything for society. It cries all the time. Most of the time, like it's more work than anything. And that baby deserves to be alive. That baby is worthy enough to be alive. So why do you feel like you're not worthy enough to be alive? And that really shook me to my core. It was one of those aha moments in therapy, you know? Yeah. And so I took that, and that's still something that I'm working on. Let's see, 18, so like 6 years later, is feeling like I'm not worthy enough to live. So that sucks, but you know, so moving on. In my second year of college, I was really in a toxic roommate situation where they were very mean to me, and I could hear them like talking about me outside my door. I locked myself away. I didn't have any real friends outside of that. And I was also trying to apply for grad school. And then one of my teachers in writing, because I was an English major, I said, hey, I am trying to get into the grad program here for creative writing. Could you look over my piece and like give me some pointers? And he basically told me, there's no way that you're going to get in. I am the person who allows people in or not, and you're toast. He told me, you're toast. And I already put like hundreds of hours like into trying to get into this particular program at FSU. And so that really rocked me to my core. And then I just kind of gave up. And that was probably one of the most suicidal like times in my life, because I didn't feel like I had a purpose. I didn't know where I was going. At this point, I didn't realize what I went through as a kid was considered, psychological or emotional abuse. And so I thought about going and living with my stepmom again in Washington, D.C., because they had moved there. And so it was just like so up in the air about everything. And so then another boy came along. Of course, my dips and my hills and my valleys, my mountains and all of that always surround a boy, it seems like. And so this boy comes up, I know, and he's like a musician, and he plays the mandolin and the guitar, and he sings and does shows, and he's like in touch with his sensitive side. And it was like we clicked immediately. But he was he had bipolar 1 and refused medication. And some people can do that, but he's definitely not one of those people. So there were lots of times where I was scared for his life during his depressions, and a lot of times where I was having to almost control him through his manias. And I didn't really know too much about bipolar at that point, so I didn't know how to disconnect myself from his illness, I guess. So it made my depression way worse, because just compounding depression on depression is really dangerous. And so we'd both get to this really, really low point. But with this relationship, it was the first relationship since my first relationship with the guy who was like, hey, I'm gay, that I was like, this is the one. And so I was very, very devastated whenever he left, because I had enmeshed myself with him, meaning that I didn't have autonomy anymore. Like, I was just the relationship. We're just going to call him Jake. I was Jaclyn and Jake. There was no Jaclyn. And so when he left, I felt like a part of me had left, and I didn't know who I was, because I went into that relationship in a severe depression, and the relationship lifted me up a little bit. And so when he was gone, I was just back to square one of, I am unworthy, I'm unlovable, everyone leaves me that I love. And so at this time, I was already with my current therapist, Angela. Shout out to Angela. She's the fucking bomb. I've been with her, goodness, maybe like 4.5 years now. And she has gotten me through everything. I forgot another boy abandoned me. And it was very sad. And I was like, oh, no one loves me. But, just boy after boy. And so after this last boy, Jake, I was like, all right, I really got to figure out why I have this boy dumps me so I want to die, like, mental, I don't know, like track. Like, I couldn't get off the rails. The train was just plowing through, and I had no control over it. So at this point, I was doing a lot of journaling. I started Jacko Loves You, which is just like my little Instagram that tries for advocacy and shares my experience. I walked everyone through every single part of my breakup, and I was like, today I'm feeling better, but I thought of him and I accidentally stalked his Instagram. Like, I was really putting myself out there, and it was very healing in the sense that this is the first time I ever talked about anything mental health related. So I ended up doing that, and it was very empowering to me. And I realized how important mental health is, and I saw myself healing. And I was like, this is possible for everyone. It's not, no one's gatekeeping healing, I was like, oh, okay. During that time, I started my first antidepressant, which I never was against medication. I was just like, I want to see if I can work this out without medication before going on it. And I know that doesn't work with everyone. Like a lot of people with schizophrenia need to be on medication to not have delusions and hallucinations and stuff. But for my depression, I was like, let's see if I can manage this first. So I wasn't managing. That breakup was so bad. I was just, video journaling in my bathroom, smoking weed and crying every night. It was so bad. And so I felt like I was pretty good in my healing journey, but I was still kind of raw, and then I'm gonna tell this story in the way that I told it at that dinner. I met this guy on Tinder, and it was just supposed to be a hookup because I was sad and lonely, and it was COVID. Don't hate me, but I was like, I'm gonna meet up with this guy. He took a COVID test, I took a COVID test, and so we hooked up a couple of times. And one time we were just sitting there, and he gave me the look, the this is more than a hookup situation. I like you more than that. And I was like, whoa. No, I just got out of a relationship maybe 6 months ago. I'm still very raw about that. And he was like, well, it doesn't have to be super serious. I just wanted you to know that I like you. And I sat him down and I grilled him. And I was like, what's your religion? What's your political views? Do you want children? Are you racist? Every single question I could ever think. And this man passed every single one of them. And I was like, I'm still sus, but we can talk, but I'm not, in a relationship with you. We're just kind of going to see how this goes. And now I'm engaged and we're living together. So this is our beautiful 2-bedroom apartment that I told you about earlier. And we've got a cat and a dog, and we're getting married in May. So
that story.
Yeah. So with Jake, that past relationship, I really was like, I need to work on myself to attract people that are on the same level as me. I read this book called Getting Past Your Breakup by Susan J. Elliott. And that book changed my life. Oh my gosh. That's one of the pivotal moments of healing for me, was reading that book. And in that book, she explains the concept of water seeks its own level. So if you have say 2 jugs, right, and you have one that's filled up here and one that's filled down here, they're going to stay like that, right? And they're not going to merge at all. But if you have a line, just a tube connecting the two at the bottom, those levels are going to even out. So the idea is, if you want a really healthy partner, right, who's really emotionally intelligent and does all of these things that you want and isn't toxic and blah, 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 you're going to have to make yourself like that to attract people like that. So that's when I started I was like, if I want this particular type of person, as my partner, I need to put in the work to become that person. And lo and behold, this guy I stumble upon is on the same level as me. And I think the great thing about it is that we're both growing together. So it's we're raising our, water levels, but at the same rate. So it's not stagnant. It's not, me getting really depressed and dragging him down. It's always been very steady. So I guess we are to present time. With my work, I realized that I couldn't do full time because that was in the period that I was really suicidal. It was before I met Jake period and then right after Jake broke up with me, that I was like the most suicidal. And so the after part was where I was doing marketing full time for a company that sells EDM flow toys for people going to rave festivals. So it's a wild job. But I grew to hate it. I was like, this isn't helping anyone. This isn't doing me any good. It just felt like the grind to get money. It was just, I was so mentally ill. I was so not in remission. And so, when I quit that job, I ended up but I created Jacko Loves You as like a brand. And I started selling t-shirts and things like that. And then I was like, I'll give myself a year and then see like what I want to do after that. Oh my God, I hated it. So it's like, okay, never mind. I don't want to do this. But the shirts and stuff were cool. I really liked doing that sort of thing, but it was just too stressful to have my, I don't know, like my motivation intrinsically tied to my income. And so it was really stressful not to just like show up and then like do as much as you can and then call it a day. It was like I always felt like I had to do something more. So it just wasn't good for my depression, and my anxiety was so bad that I would just physically like not do anything for like 3 days at a time. I'm like, I gotta work. So at this point I had been volunteering with NAMI, which is the National Alliance on Mental Illness, for about a year and a half. And the executive director, who is my current boss, came to me and she was like, we have a, basically like a stipend, to give to someone to do rural outreach, around the counties of Leon, which is, where Tallahassee is. And so I did that, and that was for 2 months. And after that, the program coordinator position was put up, maybe like 5 months. And within that time, I decided I wanted to try to be a peer specialist, which is in like inpatient, outpatient settings for mental health. There is always a peer there, meaning there's someone with mental health conditions who is in remission, who is recovered, who like talks people through what they're going through in inpatient and outpatient. And so I did that and I liked it, but I realized that it was draining me a lot, that every conversation I had with someone was like taking a little bit away from me. And I can do that, but not every single day. And at that point, I kind of wanted to be a therapist. And I was like, okay, well, now I know that I would just be expending so much of my energy doing that. And then Nancy offered me this job. And it has been so lovely because I can help people in such a direct way with mental health, which is what I'm passionate about. And I can still protect that energy, so I'm not coming home at the end of the day completely exhausted, not able to do anything. I still am doing my hobbies and, hanging out with friends and like making sure my mental health is, as intact as it can be, while also advocating for what I think is one of the most important things that we can have in our life, mental health. So whew, that was quite a monologue. Questions? Did I miss anything?
Jaclyn, I heard bits and pieces of your story at that dinner, but I had never heard the whole thing. The ups and the downs and just kind of constant for so long to get to where you are right now. I am blown away by you. I mean, I want to break down all of it. So we're going to dive in deeper.
Yeah, let's do it. Oh, talking about my story is one of my favorite things. I'm like, hey, I was sad and now I'm not as sad. Isn't that cool?
Same. I love it. I love, like, my favorite part of therapy is that I get to talk about myself for an hour, and it's all about me and what I'm going through. It's There's this quote in Desperate Housewives. Gabby says, that therapy is like a talk show all about her, just an hour talk show, and I love it. So that's how I see therapy.
Yeah.
I love getting to talk and share my story. But back to you. So you said you recognized these signs of anxiety as early as 8, 9 years old. What was that like? Break that down a little further.
I'm trying to think of like some specific. So they would be like little things. So at this point, my parents got divorced when I was 6, and then my stepmom came into the picture when I was 9. And it all happened very sudden. So the story is, my dad had been dating around, and so I wasn't like too upset that this person. Let me rename her Vicky. Okay. So Vicky is my stepmom. And so when Vicky came in, she cursed a lot. She was kind of brash, but I was like, whatever, my dad dates a bunch of different people. Well, not a bunch, every couple of months, like I would meet a girl and be like, hi, nice to meet you. Here are my drawings. Cause I was really young. And so, I was like, I didn't think much about it, but so I met her once or twice. And then on a car ride to my mom's house, my dad said, hey, oh, no, back up. So in Walmart parking lot, he told me, hey, I'm going to move to Indiana to be with Vicky and her daughter. Let's see, what's her name? Caitlin. And you're going to stay here and live with your mom. And I was like, if that's what makes you happy. And of course, I'm like sobbing, I'm crying, I'm trying to be, there for him. But at the same time, I was like, I'm going to lose my dad. And so then I think he saw how upset I was. And then he was like, okay, never mind. I'm not moving. And I was like, okay, that's awesome. But then he was like, hey, by the way, this was on the car ride to my mom's house. I'm going to marry Vicky. I had never met her daughter. I had only met her twice. And I was like, I started crying again. And so they immediately moved in. And, the change was just absolutely drastic. Caitlin had, these issues of pathological lying, and she had a lot of outbursts, and she was ill behaved, but I don't think like all of it was her fault. I feel like how she was raised and stuff just wasn't very loving. So I don't blame her. She's in recovery now and she's doing really well. But at the time, it was just really hard on me. And so I think that's where a lot of the stress came from. Like having to be in my room for the very first time. By the time I was 9, I was still sleeping in my dad's bed. And then at my mom's, I was still sleeping in my mom's bed until I was around 10. So that kind of expedited that. And I wasn't allowed to sleep with my dad. So it gave me insomnia for a really long time. So I was tired all the time, and just like little things, like there was this one time that, the parents wanted alcohol. And so they went into my like little piggy bank and got money from me, or my mom was really upset that I was staying at my dad's house for a day longer. And so then I was worried about her feelings. And then, on my dad's side with Vicky, they were always saying that you're not enough unless you X, Y, and Z. So like get good grades, unload the dishwasher, are a good kid, don't get into fights. Like it's understandable, but it put this idea in my head that I had to be a certain way to gain their love. And I want to clarify, because my dad was really, really good to me, but he didn't realize like how extensive the abuse was from my stepmom, and her telling me that I'm worthless, that I'm never going to get into college, that I'm going to be back in their house and never go anywhere, and that she just said a lot of bad things to me that my brain has really tried to protect me from. So like right now, I can't pull a lot of stuff because it was really traumatic for me at the time. And my brain just shuts that part out. So I have to really be talking to my therapist to be like, oh, that was really shitty. Like, for example, if my stepmom, let's say that I'm like cooking like a little personal pan pizza. That's what I used to eat a lot. With some cucumbers and chocolate milk. Everyone thought it was really disgusting, but I loved it. That was what I ate.
Interesting combo.
And so yeah. And so if I was like, microwaving my pizza and whatnot, if she came in the kitchen, my stepmom, we would have to leave no matter what we were doing, or we would get yelled at. Or my sister Caitlin she had a problem with binge eating, and I had a problem with like borderline not eating, like anorexia, but like I didn't really know what was going on. I just never wanted to eat, and I was losing weight and that kind of thing. So we kind of went opposite ends with our eating disorders. But Vicky was very fat phobic, and so they didn't help me at all. They just kind of praised me for being my size, which was really skinny. I was under 100 pounds at like 5'5". So I was really tiny. And then she was gaining weight. So they would put like weight loss magazines on her bed when she came home from school, or they would call her like a fat pig. They locked up all the food for her in their bedroom, and she wasn't allowed to eat except when they gave her food. And so I didn't have any of those restrictions. I had a key to their bedroom. Like I could go into my dad's stash and stuff. So they definitely treated her very unfairly. But because of that, I was terrified of doing something wrong to be treated like my sister was treated. And so they really pitted us against each other because I was the golden child and she was the scapegoat. Basically, she was the one that got all of this shit, and they put me on this pedestal and was like, this is our only child that's going to do anything. But we both suffered so severely from both of those different roles in a narcissistic family. So of course, there's no way to really know for sure, but I feel in my heart very positive that all of that going on with Vicky definitely is a major reason why I have difficulty with anxiety and depression today, because she's constantly in my head telling me I'm not good enough. So it was really hard, and I'm still working through that.
That is a lot, to say the least, especially at a young age, to have so much kind of fear of, what if I'm not perfect? What if they see a flaw in me? And I mean, we're human, we have flaws. You can't control how difficult the exam is, like that you have to take. You can't control what spelling words you get that week. Like you can't control these. Like I always say with tests, especially growing up, I can't control what the teacher puts on the test. I can control how much I study and how much I prepare, but what if there's a trick question? And then I'm falling apart on the floor crying because it wasn't perfect over something I couldn't control. I studied so hard. Or like with our weight, I remember a cheer being put on a scale to see if we were small enough to be a flyer. And it's like, what if I'm hungry? What if I just want to eat and now I feel pressured to not eat? So to kind of have that constant anxiety in your home, or that fear, is a lot. And that fear of, I don't want to say fear of, but that massive change of suddenly your dad's getting married, suddenly you're not sleeping in his bed, suddenly everything's changing. And how do you find your ground. That's a lot at a young age. And I know for me, do you like Taylor Swift?
I'm not a huge fan, but I do like her. She's great.
There's this one lyric from a song, Tied Together with a Smile, where it's, I might not be the golden one, but I'm tied, or you cry, but you don't tell anyone that you may not be the golden one, but I'm tied together with a smile. And I feel like that kind of defined, that's probably my favorite song that I still listen to when I need like something that resonates with me, like that fear of not being the golden one, of not being perfect, of not living up to that expectation. So now moving on into as you're getting older, did you see that kind of play out?
Yeah. So when I was in grade school, there was the gifted and talented program, and I tried so hard to get into that, and it was so heartbreaking to see some of my friends just not even try and be gifted and talented. And so I ended up getting in one year, and I was like, I did it. I'm a gifted kid, blah. But then, there's like this whole, I don't want to call it a resurgence, but a surgence, especially on TikTok and Instagram, about the gifted burnout kid. Do you know what I'm talking about?
Yeah.
Where it's like, I was gifted, I didn't really try in school, and now where am I? What do I have left? Like, I don't have like awards or grades to tell me how good I am, Like, especially with my jobs and my boyfriends. Because I always felt like I was not doing enough, or I wasn't enough for my job. So I always thought my boss was mad at me. And I always felt like the jobs that I was in were like not to the standard of what was expected of me from my dad, particularly, just because he wanted me to be stable. So that was really stressful. And then on the boyfriend end, I always felt like I wasn't enough. And I always was very clingy and very like, please don't leave me, because I felt so flawed. And so like, if I don't feel like I'm worthy enough to be alive, like how could I feel worthy enough for a romantic relationship, for someone to love me deeply if I don't love myself? So that sort of thing. And I feel like I have to touch on this a little bit, but so my big childhood traumas are lots of shame, lots of feeling like I'm not good enough, or like worthlessness, but then also abandonment. And this one's kind of recent, maybe within a year that I figured this out. But I was talking to my therapist, and I was like, but my dad didn't leave. I don't have any abandonment. And she said, yes, whenever he married Vicky, and she did all of these horrible things to me, and he just stood by and, didn't do anything about it, that was a form of abandonment. And so then I was looking to fill that void with men, with other people. And then I would, and that person would be like, fill that void, and I would feel full and together and have hope. But then when they left, it triggered that abandonment trauma. And so that's why all of these breakups were so hard for me. And that's why in my current relationship, I'm still subconsciously very worried that he's going to leave me. And he knows all of this. And he's like, I put a ring on it. Like, I'm not leaving. But I'm like, no, it could still happen. But we're having to work through that as a couple, of like trusting and just knowing that he's going to be there for me, and like, we're going to work through this together and stuff like that. So, it definitely was it's very hard. And I feel like when you're developing as a child, like these things impact so much that you carry them your whole life. And I'm still carrying my traumas, and it seems like a lot of my anxiety and my depression is tied to those. I've been doing a lot of meditating recently. Like, I'm going on a silent meditation retreat this weekend, my very first. I'm very excited. And I'm kind of realizing like, okay, well, why am I anxious about this? oh, well, it goes back to Brian leaving me, my fiance leaving me, or oh, I don't feel like I'm worthy enough to buy a Brita filter because it's $40 and why do I deserve that? Like, it's just like the weirdest stuff that it comes out in. Like the other day, this is a little bit of a lengthy story, but I think it is just so perfectly encompasses my mental illness and like how frustrating and dumb it can be sometimes. And I use dumb lovingly, but also in a frustrated way. So it was right after the NAMI conference. So I get back, and so Brian and I do this thing where I'll be like, hey, surprise, I put up pictures like in the living room. And he's like, oh, it looks great. Like, and then we get excited. And so he did that for me. He was like, hey, I put together our bed frame. And I was like, yeah, this is awesome. And so we're like looking at the bed, and I'm like, oh, we have so much room. We're both really excited about it. We're laying down. We're like having a good time. So like 4 hours, 5 hours later, we go to sleep. And I look down at the bed and I'm like, panic, just washed over. And I was like, I can't sleep here. And then immediately I'm like, why can't I sleep here? That's really odd. And then I went into this spiral of like, okay, well, what am I going to do? Because at this point, like, I was like, I would rather sleep on the floor in the living room than sleep on this bed. But I couldn't figure out why. And so I was like, Jaclyn, just sleep in the bed. Too, I can't do it. And so it spiraled and spiraled until I had a panic attack. And then I took panic attack medicine. And then I had another panic attack. So I had to take more panic attack medicine. And so finally, Brian and I were like, okay, well, it's late. Why don't we just take the bed frame and put it in the living room and sleep on the floor like we have been, because we just moved. So we didn't have a bed frame for like a month and a half, 2 months. So we just put the bed back on the floor. And so then I fell asleep. The next day I was like, hey, that was really weird. Let's talk about it. And he was like, yeah, sure. We talked about it for maybe 45 seconds. Have another panic attack. And I was like, what is this? So luckily I had an Angela appointment is what I call it, my therapy appointment. And so we're kind of walking through it. And finally I realized, I was like, is it because we didn't put the bed together? And she was like, that's it. I was like, that makes no sense. And she was like, actually it does, because, excuse me, you're a story person. You want to create memories with your partner. And that's how you kind of like traverse life. But him doing it without you kind of makes you feel like, well, what if he does other stuff without me? Which triggers, drum roll please, my abandonment trauma. And so it triggered my depression and anxiety so incredibly much that I ended up having panic attacks and all those things, but it all tied back to my childhood trauma. And then whenever I got to the root of that, I was like, okay, I'm good. And so it took us 2 weeks. We ended up moving the bed on the ground over a couple feet because that's where we wanted the bed to be when it was on the post. And then I slept like that for a couple nights and I was like, I hate this. And then I was like, okay, it's not that bad. And then we put it on the bed frame, and then I didn't like it a couple nights, but now I'm fine with it. So it's just like, you, as someone who like, you know, has depression and anxiety, it takes some extra steps, you know?
Being self-aware to figure out what those extra steps are and to recognize the childhood trauma and having that therapist to support you through it is so important, because childhood trauma plays out over and over again until we work through it. And it takes so much to work through it. A lot of people have this misconception that you're just gonna like recognize what it is and be like, fixed it, done. No, it's gonna take a long time, and that's okay. And it may not present itself in the same way for a while, and you might think, oh, I did move past it, and then something happens that triggers it, and that's okay too.
Childhood trauma can like really stay with us, and a lot of people think that, oh, I know what it is, therefore I can fix it, but it just takes so much time to do that.
Yes, so much time, and it's okay if it takes you decades. If it takes like, if it's a lifelong thing, if it's something that you do figure out a way to heal and move through, earlier on, that all of it's okay and everyone's experience is valid through that. We are running out of time, but to wrap up, what is one piece of advice you'd like to share to someone else who's maybe struggling or in the beginning of that recovery journey?
No one is going to heal you except you. You have to make the decision to better your life and your mental health, because it has to come from within you. So let's say you're going to therapy. You have to do your homework. You have to really understand and listen to what your therapist is telling you. You have to read self-help books and then put those things into practice. You have to be conscious and understanding and patient with yourself, but no one else is going to do that for you. You have to be the one to you're in the front, you're the person who has the big sign in the front of a parade, like all of the support, all of the help, you have to seek it out. It doesn't just happen to you. You have to be the one to grab the reins.
Thank you so much for listening to Normalize the Conversation. Don't forget to subscribe, rate, and review. This podcast is an initiative of Inspiring My Generation, focusing on normalizing the conversation, bringing education and awareness to the forefront, and amplifying global voices to spark change and hope. Inspiring My Generation is a 501c3 nonprofit organization on a mission towards suicide prevention through awareness, conversation, education, and support. Connect with us on Instagram at Inspiring My Generation and visit our website inspiringmygeneration.org to learn more about our work and how you can make a difference.